Hey you guys, it's nearing the end of the day and I'm gonna make a video on blueberries. There's so much fruit in the garden right now. Loquats, mulberries, peaches, blueberries, blackberries, just a lot of berries. And so I want to be thorough and take my time. I sometimes get in a rush, and we'll go through the cultivars and talk a little bit about making the soil and planting them. So this right here is our first blueberry that we're going to talk about, and this is palmetto. This blueberry is in a raised bed, or essentially I used some pine logs and added its soil to get it up off the ground. So it's just coming into its season. We'll see some are earlier, some are later, but having a good crop this year. Here's a few more that are ripe. So we'll see berry size here. This is palmetto. And there's also some really different flavors, but a lot of it, I feel like, so getting into the flavors is so dependent on the season, on the plant, on everything like that. So here's our next blueberry plant to look at. This is Emerald, and this is actually the one that I would highest recommend, or it's one of my top three. It's a really big berry, and it looks really thin and sparse, but that's actually because it had some major dieback from drying out. Like, look how thick that's thicker than my thumb. So it just had a really hard year, and here's some of the first few. I've been nibbling for a few days, but we're just getting into the season, so it's kind of the top end of it. But anyway, the reason it dried out is because it's in a pot, and the reason blueberries are done in pots in Houston is because they need really acidic soil. Ericaceae plants, or they're ericaceous, they need acidic soil, which means that calcium, which is just an element that has basic relationships, kind of like the way sulfur naturally moves for acidic relationships, calcium does the same. So calcium is really bad, and we have a high pH, high calcium soil, like native soil here in Houston. As you get towards East Texas, piney woods, you get a little more acidity, but in general we can't grow blueberries in the ground. It's either raised beds or in pots, and in pots you got to irrigate. So Emerald is a much bigger one. You saw, okay, so palmetto over there in the ground is about 4 or 5 feet, and so that's about the size. These are southern highbush cultivars. Here's a southern highbush cultivar that is supposed to be semi-dwarf. This is Sunshine Blue, I think. Let's see. Yeah, Sunshine Blue. So good fruit set. We might lose light on this video. Really, really dense and pretty decent size. Taste test. Not near as acidic as palmetto, but even though it's supposed to be semi-dwarf, what you're seeing though is a smaller leaf and density. You see that goldenrod shoot? It was really pushed out by the goldenrod that kind of made it grow up higher. So it's going to be a really great year for pineapple guava. I mean, look at those. Look at all that fruit set. So this system, so the way I'm growing them in pots, it's the same over there. It's a pot in a pot, and I have a clip because there's one I just planted, so I can show you guys what that looks like. So this is like a 25-gallon regular old nursery pot, and this is a special pot. It's actually a paint bucket, or not a paint bucket, but I got it from a friend. I bought it off a friend, but they came from DuPont or something. They had some resin or polymer or something in it. But anyway, it's a non-draining pot that this fits inside of, so it allows me to have a water reservoir. And what I've done is I've drilled holes at about this high, really small holes so mosquitoes can't get in, like 1/8 of an inch. And so that allows it to be full. So you see how there's moisture here, and I threw an iris in and it took. I'm gonna try and lift it, see if the wasps will forgive me. All right, yeah, it's working. So you can see it's full of water, and I won't show you the overflows, but you can trust me, they're there. This is Snow Chaser, and so far we've only seen southern highbush, and Snow Chaser here is living up to its name, and it has the earliest fruit of all the cultivars. And this plant is smaller than the others because it is younger, that's all. So I would expect it to be 4 or 5 feet full size, but yummy, yummy. Very good berry, like very sweet, not on the tart side at all. Good flavor. And look at these peaches. I don't know how well you can see. There's some good peaches in here. A lot. So that'll be really fun. I've already eaten a few. Now this is Jewel. Jewel's another southern high bush. That's what I got into because that was what was available and different. Jewel, like Emerald, suffered some major dieback from not getting watered. And Jewel makes really nice big berries. They're coming in a little more staggered than some of the others. So she has some that are real tiny. Maybe a little more tartness, but again, I mean, it could have been the berry. The sun is setting and the bees are working hard this time of year. And blackberries too, so let me show you all these blueberries. I don't know if you can pick it up in the light, but they're all through here hiding out. Anyway, so this sad spindly thing that is aborting its blueberries, this is our first Rabbiteye. So this is Climax, and Climax here, here's some more blackberries. Climax is not in the wicking bottom. So see here, it just has holes down there, and it has a rough go of it. So Rabbiteye are actually, they're as big or bigger than southern highbush. The southern highbush has more dwarf cultivars, and when it comes to Rabbiteye, Climax is like the industry standard, kind of like the Owari Satsuma is still like one of the best. Climax is a really old cultivar, but it's still definitely one of the best. And so you'll get Climax, Tiff Blue, Premier, those are Rabbiteye, and they're good. All blueberries benefit from cross-pollination, so you'll get a much heavier fruit set if you have your blueberries at least near each other. Mine are spread out because I have found it makes an incredible difference with the birds eating them. I had all my plants together and I would just watch the mockingbird, you know, destroy them. But once I've spread them out, you saw how many were on Snow Chaser. They just, I don't know, you know, there's just, it's one little plant and they're not as into it. So this cultivar is called Gulf Coast. It's a southern highbush. It is on the semi-dwarf side. You can see it's got a much smaller leaf and berries. Let's see, might have been underripe. But what you'll see here is pretty poor fruit set, and I'm like 90% sure that that is from poor pollination. It might have been a little bit of drought stress because these pots do, you know, I do have to water them. But it's sitting here just doing its own thing. Now, the cool thing about Gulf Coast and some of these southern highbush, this has the most beautiful fall color. So this is like a deep burning red, like burning bush, you know, kind of red. When these leaves go in the fall, it is really nice and gorgeous. So there are a lot of blueberry cultivars that could absolutely be ornamentals just for their fall color, for their bloom, for, you know, fruit too, but you know, kind of getting into have a little huckleberry in your native landscape kind of thing. Anyway, we'll jump to the other side. Over here, underneath the mulberry tree, which is still running high in mulberries, and this has been a long time. But this good fruit set is on a cultivar called Star. Star is a southern highbush. I'm not sure, berry size looks small. Now, again, it's all depends on the culture, because I put this thing in the shade. It's under this mulberry. It might be smaller fruit because of that. You can see that this is a taller cultivar. It's stretching up for the light, but that's a good 5 feet in the pot, and you know, strong plant. I put them in the shade because I don't want them to dry out, because I might leave for the summer. I might, you know, they might be totally on their own. So last one, there are a couple others. Oh, and there's a bunny right there. Do you see his head? There he is. Hi, bunny. 5 feet from us. Anyway, this is Windsor. Totally different cluster shape. Do you see how they're kind of like all dense clusters? Windsor actually can make a bigger berry. This is just super deep shade, and I am probably going to pull this out maybe this evening and get it just a little more sun to finish. But you know, a wide, low plant growing quite different, you know, in habit than some of the others. Since vertical, this is a little more shrubby, so it might be a semi-dwarf, but I think it's more just how it culture, you know, how it's doing. You want to collect rainwater for your blueberries. That is the way to be successful. They can be in full sun, mine are in part shade. This, you know, didn't establish in this much shade, but it is fruiting still in this much shade. So that shows you where you can go, and they're really tough plants. They can be heavy on the wet side. They can be really dried out. You know, we see them growing up on mountains like extremophiles where there's no soil. They're doing their thing. So so yeah, hopefully that gives you a rundown. I've got a Tiff Blue right here. So my Rabbiteye, they're actually pretty old. Here's some fruit set. So this is another Rabbiteye type, and it's just, this pot doesn't hold water very well and gets really dried out. That's why these berries are small. These would be bigger if it was in the wicking pot. So I think that's all of them. I think there might be a Misty that I missed. I missed the Misty. And I just planted one. You saw we're lifting the bucket to show you guys the water reservoir. This jewel, so I have 2 jewels. Decent cultivar. It's actually the one that is at Houston Garden Center. That's why I have 2 jewels. So this one is actually pretty old. It's a little bit younger, almost the same age as that palmetto, and it's had some dieback, and that's just because the ones in the pots I'll bucket water to, but this one, it's on its own because it kind of has ground access, you know, better reservoir. It's still setting some fruit, but they're on the small side, probably for lack of water. And you can see it's tall. That's you know, that's blueberry right there. So it's about 5 foot, and it just got a ton of light. I just cut the top off of that Chinese tallow. So if we get some rains, it's gonna have a good regrowth kind of summer. But that's another one that's in a raised planter. Same mix, you know, a lot of pine bark, organic matter. And actually, let me show you guys a quick mix so that you can do this on your own and get your blueberries started. Even though I don't think there is one right recipe, some people really benefit from having some clear directions. So if I was gonna make a blueberry mix and I had all the resources I could want, this is probably what I would do. So I would go, and the chickens are, I had to move over here because the driveway's now full of broken concrete, but I'm getting clucked at pretty loud. She laid an egg. So this is pine bark mulch, and it's going to be, we'll call that 1 1/2 parts pine bark mulch. So 1 1/2, 2/3. This is what it looks like. Some good stuff. And then, so 1 1/2 pine bark, 1 part peat moss. So you saw my red tub, that was for getting it nice and wet. Here's the peat moss. And that is the bulk of the soil, that's the volume. So then I would switch to the inoculants. I have some finished compost. This is leaf mold compost, complete with trash. So that'd be probably 1/2 part or less of finished compost. And then another 1/2 part or less of, this is sandy topsoil, complete with roots and biology. So these are for inoculants. And I think even if your topsoil is high pH, as long as it's not like slip clay heavy, you should add it, because you're going to be able to counteract a sandy high pH soil with your sulfur. So those are our first main ingredients, and then we're talking amendments. So the sulfur, for this volume right here, I'd probably use 1/2 cup. So it's this is 3 or 4 cubic feet, maybe. And let's see, that's a cup. I'm filled it up about there. That is about a cup. You know what? I'm not gonna use it all. So I left about that much, but that was about a half a cup of sulfur. And then the same, maybe a quarter cup, half a cup of microlife. The clucking is getting me. And then it's a mix. So I made a mix for planting that last blueberry, and I incorporated the pine bark nuggets, the big chunky pieces. And actually this is that mix that was planted in. And what I wanted to share is that it's all about the ratios. When I was thinking of using the pine bark nuggets, I wanted them to be giving it better drainage to allow, you know, more airspace and water to go through. And really at the ratio that I used them, they were going to hinder the drainage because they're going to just hold water on their surface. There was, so it's like a perched water table. When you have big flat objects in your mix, that's what'll happen. So it's kind of like when you're mixing cement, the ratios are really important. If I had just had more pine bark nuggets available, then it would have, you know, drained better. I still think it's going to be a fine mix, and the blueberry will grow well. But just something to think on. It's like you're shooting for ratios of coarse material and finer material, and when you have just a little bit of coarse, or this proper amount, then all the fine material fills in the gaps and it ends up not draining as well. So the coarse material in this mix is the pine bark, and mine is quite broken down, so I don't want it, well, a lot of factors to talk about, but I'm shooting for a ratio. So if you want yours to drain more quickly, or mainly to dry out better, then you want to use more of the pine bark, and you also want it to be raw. Like mine was not very raw at all, so mine is going to act differently. And the blueberry, as long as the pH is good, he's going to grow fine. It's just about how often you water and stuff like that. So I've mixed it all up. Here it is. It's a little bit on the heavy side, and that's just because I don't have the big chunky coarse material. I don't have the raw pine bark, and I don't have the nuggets. So yeah, if you have those available, your mix is going to grow even better. You're just going to have to water it a little more often. I also want to add that I do continually add sulfur to my pots. Not continually, on like a yearly basis, because this sulfur can be leached out if you're irrigating, right? And it could wash away, and there's not really a strong bank of sulfur or pH lowering material in the soil itself, other than the peat has low pH. So probably once a year I sprinkle some of the pelletized sulfur on the pot, probably about the same time I'm fertilizing, because I do them not that often, maybe once a year. And so just a little sprinkle to help continually add some acidity, because that's the name of the game with the blueberries, low pH. And then as far as watering, okay, the #1 reason the blueberries die is because people water them with city water. The city water here comes in above a pH of 8, and that's like instant death. So you pretty much can be successful if you just save rainwater and just only water them with rainwater. It's pretty hard to kill a blueberry unless you water it with city watering. So I'll end it there. Hopefully you got something valuable out of this, and I'll catch you later. Peace.